while the mob stole his places blind. They estimate $7 million that was taken out of the Stardust. I don't think they'll ever really know how much.
One of the stories in Las Vegas was the fact that Alan Robert Glick, who got $126 million from the Teamsters Union, was owned by the Chicago mob. This later proved to be true, and it's documented in court record and newspapers.
Mr. Glick didn't know at the time there were strings attached, but he found out later on that the head of his casino operations, Mr. Rosenthal, reported directly to the Chicago La Cosa Nostra. There came a time that Mr. Glick wanted to make some changes, and of course was told by Mr. Rosenthal that's not going to occur.
Frank Lefty Rosenthal, who was the mob's man on the inside, who actually ran the skim at the Argent casinos, the casinos owned by Glick. Carl Thomas, who was an otherwise respected gaming executive who actually devised the methods by which the mob skimmed the millions.
I'm sincerely sorry for the embarrassment I've caused the state of Nevada, my partners, and my employees, and most of all, my family. I further like to say that from this day on, with this revocation, that I'm out of the gambling business after 23 years. Other than that, I can't say anything.
Glick pretty much spilled the beans on how it worked. The Teamster money comes in, he puts people into his casino, they rob it blind, then the money is taken back to the Midwestern families. Now, a question I should maybe ask you, because I don't know the answer to it, why Alan Glick is not dead. Why is this man not dead? I don't know. We have an interview that we did with Lefty, and wherein Lefty says, well, I serve at Mr. Glick's pleasure. He says, whatever he says he wants me to do, that's fine. Well, actually, in the true hierarchy of what was going on in Argent, Alan Glick did what Lefty Rosenthal said, and he knew what would happen to him if he didn't.
I serve at Mr. Glick's pleasure.
And could you describe Mr. Glick's pleasure?
You don't have enough time. That's a good answer. We don't have enough time for that.
We see you growing more with the with Argent Corporation, taking a higher position possibly?
That's a question for Mr. Glick.
Mr. Rosenthal's in as high a position as you can have now.
Mr. Rosenthal liked to think himself as an important person, and as far as he was concerned, if he could associate in those kinds of circles, those kinds of big names, Mr. Sinatra, Tony Bennett, and other people that he had as guests, that made himself look good, made himself feel important.
Tonight, live, the all-new Frank Rosenthal Show. From the Stardust Hotel in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, it's the all-new Frank Rosenthal Show.
Conference at which he denied any of this mob involvement. I'm just a show producer. I'm getting a bad rap, until the pressure really came down on him years later, and then he rolled over, as so many people did.
They figure before they got through, they had skinned $22 million and got caught. And that was the end of that era. Rosenthal's in trouble. And one night Rosenthal's over at a restaurant. 2 FBI agents are sitting in there watching Rosenthal. He comes out of Tony Roma's, right? Which is right across the street. Yes, exactly. Gets in his car, starts the engine, they watch him go blown right through the ceiling.
The undercarriage of the Cadillac was protected by a steel plate, which made the force of the explosion go downward and outward, as opposed to upward, which would have killed Rosenthal. That was a messed up attempt. And I think it was ordered by Spilotro.
Tony Spilatro's name was a name that you didn't mention in public unless you wanted trouble. Everyone knew who he was, but you didn't want to cross him. He was a dangerous, dangerous man. I mean, everyone has heard the stories of Tony Spilatro as a young man in Chicago when he was making his way up in the rackets, taking a man and putting his head in a vice and squeezing it so hard until he popped his eyeballs out.
Anybody that would meet him for the first time, you would think you're meeting your brother. That's how type of a person he was. He was just a pleasant person to be with. He had well-mannered, well-preserved, well-spoken of. And I've never seen a man get irate. I've never seen him get out of line. I mean, he apologizes when he has to. People, he was very considerate of everybody. And as far as changing anything in Vegas, I think Vegas, with the medium, and in Vegas, they try to make him a bad boy.
Oh, he was a frightening man. I mean, he did have a stare. He never gave me a so-called death stare. He had no reason to, but he could give a man a stare that would stop you in your steps. I'd heard that from many people, many times.
There was times I was with him when there was articles about him in the newspaper, and he would say, "Look at this, now look what they're saying," and then he would say, "Now look at this, now look what they're saying about me." And I made a comment one time. I says, "Tony," I said, "if you live long enough, they're going to blame you for Abe Lincoln's killing."
He was too crazy. And, I mean, there's a great story here about the IRS, Internal Revenue.
Yes.
They set up a phony bookie here, a sting. They wanted to catch Spilatro. So they set up an illegal book, and he used to gamble a lot. So he gambles with them. And finally, he's about $40,000 in debt to them. And they call him up and say, "Hey, we want our money." They're trying to be tough, right? Yeah. "I'll be right over." He comes over and he pulls a gun out and says, "I'm going to kill you." Right to the IRS guy. Next day, they closed the whole operation down. But see, those kind of stories were bad for Chicago. They didn't want a leader like that.
The order to kill Spilatro had to be approved by the top bosses. Yeah, that was a big hit. Not a Hollywood hit, but a big hit in the vernacular of the mob here. And Joseph Nagal Ferriola, who died a few years ago, had to be the one who arranged for Spilatro to meet his demise, because Ferriola despised him, and according to what I've heard, Spilatro despised Ferriola, made remarks about Ferriola. What right has that guy got running a mob? He hasn't got brains enough to come in out of the rain. Remarks like that.
Good evening. Federal authorities tonight have issued a fugitive arrest warrant for mobster Tony Spilatro, but he is still officially a missing person at this moment.
Here in Illinois, a missing car has turned up. The 1986 Lincoln Continental Mark 7, in which Spilatro and his brother Michael were reported last seen in Oak Park.
The manhunt in Chicago intensified. Speculation mounted. What had happened to Tough Tony? On June 14th, Tony Spilatro and his younger brother Michael left Michael's Chicago home for a meeting. They did not return.
An innocent bystander type, his brother Michael. Now, one of the reasons that they took Michael to a motel, as the legend goes, or to some place where they tortured the two of them, was because they felt that Spilatro was so tough he wouldn't talk. But if he saw his brother endangered, he might then talk about where the loot was.
It's my theory that if they did not want Spilatro and his brother Michael found, they would have buried him in the Ayupa property, which was a forest, or a woods, rather. But they wanted him found, so they buried him in the farm field.
In 1977, Anthony Accardo, the head of the Chicago mob, met with the heads of the Eastern families. This is according to FBI documentation, and made a deal. Chicago takes Las Vegas, the Eastern families get Atlantic City. That'll keep the peace. And that's the way it was for many years, until 1989. And that's when they met again and said, the deal's off. Las Vegas is, in essence, an open city again.
Atlantic City was going by our rules, and they try to be a little more strict. An awful lot of people have played there, lost, are really discouraged. They don't want to go back. And there's nothing to do there. I'm from New Jersey originally. I've been in Atlantic City before they had gambling. I've been invited there many times. I would never want to go there. There's nothing to do. There's no golf courses, no tennis. There's been a lot of robberies, unreported, when people leave the hotels with big money. They're very tough with people with low markers. If somebody lost a lot of money there and they want to make some restitution, they don't even want to cooperate with them.
In New Jersey, they tried to tighten up the laws that we had here. They thought, well, we're not going to let the mob move in and all that. We're going to make it, they can't gamble all night. New laws. We're going to have a man on the floor all the time. In case somebody has a complaint, we'll have a man standing there. But they never realized, New Jersey had a lot of crime.
People will always ask the question, how much crime is involved? Well, where are you going to get your people to run the games in any particular city? You are going to get a priest? Are you going to get a nun? It's going to be somebody for the background that's knows the odds percentage. It was a street hustler who had to fight for everything he got. And that's where all the people came from in organized crime.
Well, we have sports betting here, for example. They don't have it in Atlantic City. They're open 24 hours here. They're not open 24 hours in Atlantic City. The costs here are somewhat less than Atlantic City, so you attract more maybe vacationers. There, you attract slot machine players. I think what I'm getting at, I don't think there's any difference as far as the potential for organized crime activity. I think the difference is in all economics and in marketing and just the state of affairs in gaming. And the way the states regulate it is certainly their business. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I mean, we all have our objectives in keeping organized crime out, and I think that both systems are successful at doing that.